Chapter 1 Introduction. The unseen industry. Torture is prohibited under international law, condemned by human rights organizations, and rejected by moral standards around the world. Yet, behind the global rhetoric of justice and dignity exists a thriving, concealed economy dedicated to the manufacture and trade of torture instruments. These are not abstract symbols of oppression, they are tangible devices, mass-produced in factories, promoted at defense expos, and shipped across borders like ordinary commodities. From electric shock batons that leave no trace, to restraint chairs designed to immobilize the human body for hours, to high-tech surveillance systems used to locate and silence dissenters. The tools of modern torture are as diverse as they are insidious. Many are labeled as non-lethal or compliance aids, giving them an aura of legitimacy. In reality, these products are part of an expanding global supply chain that feeds authoritarian regimes, militarized police forces, and private security contractors. The industry operates in the shadows not because it is secret, but because it is normalized. Governments issue export licenses. Corporations list these tools in sanitized catalogs. Trade fairs showcase them alongside crowd control gear and riot shields. The actors involved claim to follow the law. But the law, in many cases, is vague, outdated, or riddled with loopholes. What's more disturbing is how these tools end up in the hands of those who use them, not for defense, but for suppression. Devices designed in Western democracies are routinely found in torture chambers across the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Shockingly, these tools are often subsidized by the very taxpayers, who would oppose their use if they knew where their money was going. This hidden industry prompts urgent and uncomfortable questions. Who manufactures these instruments of pain? Under what legal frameworks are they allowed to operate? Which governments and agencies are complicit in their global trade? And most importantly, why has this business not been stopped? This chapter opens the door to a world that thrives on silence, an ambiguity, a world where morality is optional, accountability is rare, and profits are made off human suffering. To understand the full scope of modern torture, one must first understand the industry behind it. This book aims to trace that economy, its architects, its enablers, its victims, and the mechanisms that allow it to persist. It is not just a study in trade, but a confrontation with complicity. Certainly, here is a more detailed and expanded version of Chapter 2. Historical origins from colonial tools to modern devices, and P, Chapter 3, the manufacturers. No names and hidden entities. Chapter 2, historical origins from colonial tools to modern devices. The history of torture device manufacturing is deeply intertwined with the history of empire, war, and the control of human bodies. Long before the modern era of global arms trade and high-tech surveillance, empires devised physical tools to exert domination, extract information, and break resistance. These devices were not created in laboratories or factories, but in colonial workshops, military forts, and punishment camps. During the colonial era, European powers such as Britain, France, Spain, and Portugal used brutal instruments to maintain their grip on vast territories. Iron shackles were used to restrain slaves and prisoners. Stocks and pillories subjected victims to public humiliation and immobilization. Whips and batons were used routinely to punish, coerce, and terrorize indigenous populations. These implements served not only to punish but to assert dominance, often in front of others, to instill fear. As technology advanced, so did the tools of repression. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw the industrialization of punishment. Leather restraints gave way to mechanical cuffs and leg irons. Pain-inflicting devices became standardized and mass-produced, often alongside legitimate security tools for prisons or police. By the time of World War II, regimes like Nazi Germany had refined physical and psychological torture to systematic extremes, often using tools designed specifically for sensory deprivation, immobilization, and prolonged suffering. The Cold War ushered in a new era of scientific torture, often under the guise of interrogation research. The CIA's MKUltra program, for instance, explored the use of drugs, sleep deprivation, electric shock, and isolation as methods of psychological breakdown. Latin American military dictatorships, many of them trained and funded by Western powers, adopted and adapted these methods. Electric shock machines, commonly known as La Picana, were used in Argentina, Brazil, and Chile to inflict intense pain without leaving visible marks. These devices were no longer cobbled together by local enforcers, they were designed, manufactured, and sold as law enforcement tools. From this legacy emerged a modern industry where pain-inflicting devices are not seen as tools of torture, but as instruments of order, compliance, and behavioral control. The labels may have changed today. We speak of non-lethal force, correctional equipment, or crowd management solutions, but the core purpose remains chillingly familiar. Chapter 3. The manufacturer is known. Names and hidden entities. The manufacture of torture devices in the modern era is driven by a complex network of defense contractors, private security firms, and dual-use technology companies. These entities operate in a globalized economy where the lines between military, policing, and corporate interests have become increasingly blurred. Some of the most prominent players are surprisingly public. Their names appear on trade show banners, in government procurement contracts, and in export documents. Yet their role in enabling torture often hides in plain sight. 1. China North Industries Corporation Norinco, one of the world's largest arms manufacturers. Norinco produces a range of security and enforcement tools, including electric shock batons, stun guns, shackles, and riot control gear. Norinco has faced repeated criticism for supplying equipment to authoritarian regimes, with well-documented histories of torture and abuse, including Sudan, Zimbabwe, and Iran. Despite sanctions, the company continues to find eager buyers through intermediaries. 2. Axon, formerly Taser International, a leading U.S. company in the development of conducted energy weapons. Axon produces the Taser stun gun, now used by law enforcement agencies worldwide. While marketed as a non-lethal alternative to firearms, THSRs have been linked to thousands of deaths and countless instances of police brutality. Reports from countries like Brazil, South Africa, and the Philippines suggest that these devices are often used punitively, not just for subduing threats. 3. Sofairland, Promtech, and Combined Tactical Systems, CTS, these U.S.-based companies manufacture a wide range of riot control products, including tear gas, pepper spray, batons, beanbag rounds, and rubber bullets. Their products have been used in civil unrest crackdowns from Hong Kong to Egypt, and in prison settings across the Americas. Many of these firms have been the subject of human rights complaints and civil lawsuits. 4. European suppliers, Germany, Czech Republic, France. European firms are also deeply embedded in this trade. German and Czech manufacturers have been linked to the export of metal restraint chairs, shackles, and other devices used in detention centers. French firms have supplied crowd control equipment to governments known for violently suppressing protests, including in North Africa and the Middle East. These companies often rely on ambiguous export categories and rerouting via third countries to avoid regulatory scrutiny. 5. Shell companies. In gray markets, many manufacturers avoid direct accountability by creating shell companies or working through intermediaries in unregulated markets. For example, a stun gun might be produced in one country, exported through a third, and sold to a fourth, creating layers of obfuscation. Some products are rebranded or mislabeled as agricultural tools, training equipment, or medical restraints to pass customs. 6. Digital and surveillance firms. In recent years, manufacturers of surveillance tools such as facial recognition software, spyware, and mobile phone interceptors have become active players in modern torture economies. Companies like NSO Group, Israel, and *** Hacking Team, Italy, have supplied tools that enable authoritarian regimes to track, blackmail, and silence opponents. These digital tools often precede physical torture by identifying and isolating targets. Conclusion of chapters 2 and 3. The global industry behind torture devices is not run by shadowy underworld figures. It is powered by respected corporations, licensed exporters, and technology innovators operating under the veil of legality. Their products are not always illegal, but their end use often is. The challenge lies not only in exposing who these manufacturers are, but in confronting the systems that allow their operations to continue unchecked. Chapter 4. Marketing torture, rebranding, and euphemisms. Torture devices are not advertised as such. Instead, manufacturers employ an arsenal of euphemisms and sanitized language to present these products as essential tools for law enforcement, peacekeeping, or crowd management. What would otherwise be labeled as an instrument of cruelty is rebranded as a compliance device, public order solution, or non-lethal restraint system. Product brochures frequently feature actors in clean uniforms, demonstrating the devices in controlled, harmless environments, rooms, classrooms, or mock riot scenarios. There is no blood, no cries of pain, no context of political oppression. A restraint chair is shown holding a mannequin, not a shackled political prisoner. A tear gas canister is launched into an empty parking lot, not a crowded protest of women demanding rights. Global arms and security expos play a central role in the marketing of these tools. Events like Millipol France, Eurosatory France, DSCI UK, and the China Police Expo showcase a disturbing array of gear under the glossy banner of public security solutions. These exhibitions attract representatives from police forces, military units, and intelligence services, including those from nations with documented histories of torture and human rights violations. Many booths avoid details about end-user agreements, While exhibitors claim their products are used responsibly, they rarely enforce how or where the equipment ends up. Behind closed doors, sales are negotiated with officials from authoritarian states, often with the implicit knowledge that these tools will be used for suppression rather than protection. The language of marketing is carefully curated to avoid legal scrutiny and public backlash. Terms like pain compliance are used to describe stun batons. Enhanced restraint systems refer to devices that immobilize prisoners for hours. The word torture never appears, but its shadow looms large. Chapter 5. Government support, licenses, subsidies, and secrecy. The global trade in torture equipment would not exist without the silent endorsement and often active support. Governments, far from being rogue operations, many manufacturers operate under the protection and encouragement of state institutions. This support takes several forms: export licenses, government subsidies, military aid, and classified contracts. Export licenses. The official greenlighting countries like the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and China. Defense and security products including crowd control and restraint tools require government-issued export licenses. These licenses are ostensibly issued after human rights assessments. In practice, however, documentation shows a long history of approvals to countries known for systematic abuse. For example, the UK government has issued licenses for stun guns, shackles, and tear gas to nations accused of using them in political repression, including Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. French authorities have approved shipments of crowd control gear to regimes such as Algeria and Cameroon. Despite reports of mass arrests and torture, Germany has allowed the export of restraint chairs and electroshock devices to regions with histories of custodial abuse. Security aid and military packages beyond commercial licenses. Many governments fund or directly provide torture-enabling equipment under the guise of foreign aid or strategic partnerships. U.S. military assistance programs, for instance, have equipped foreign police units with batons, riot gear, and surveillance tools as part of counterterrorism or anti-narcotics missions. Sometimes, this aid is discretionary and exempt from public disclosure laws, further cloaking it in secrecy. Similarly, EU member states have participated in joint security programs with African and Middle Eastern nations, supplying training and gear that ends up in repressive crackdowns. Economic incentives and subsidies. Manufacturers also benefit from state subsidies, tax incentives, or classified defense contracts. Some companies producing torture-enabling tools are designated as strategic industries, making them eligible for generous public funding. Their executives sit on advisory panels. Their products are purchased by domestic police. Their expansion is celebrated as economic progress even when their exports fuel violence abroad. Governments justify these practices in the name of national security or trade. Competitiveness. The victims of these policies are rarely acknowledged. Chapter 6. The role of technology. Companies. The 21st century has ushered in a new frontier in the torture economy: digital surveillance and psychological warfare. While the world has long associated torture with physical devices, handcuffs, batons, electric probes, the modern reality is more insidious. Today, some of the most potent tools of repression are coded in lines of software, hidden in phones or built into CCTV cameras. Major tech companies, particularly in the West and China, have developed and exported advanced digital tools now used by authoritarian regimes to track, monitor, and neutralize political opponents. Surveillance infrastructure, facial recognition systems, voice recognition, gait analysis, and biometric scanners are now standard in many cities, not just to deter crime, but to suppress dissent. In Xinjiang, China, such technologies are used to monitor Uyghur Muslims, detect suspicious behavior, and preemptively arrest individuals based on predictive algorithms, spyware, and hacking tools. The Israeli firm NSO Group, maker of the notorious Pegasus spyware, sold its services to governments that used the software to hack phones belonging to journalists, human rights defenders, and political rivals. Victims included murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi's associates, Indian activists, and Rwandan opposition leaders. Other firms, like Italy's hacking team and Germany's Finfisher, have similarly sold spyware to governments in Ethiopia, Bahrain, Turkey, and beyond. Predictive policing and AI profiling. Some companies now sell AI-powered policing platforms that analyze social media activity, personal networks, and behavioral data to identify potential dissidents before they act. These systems, used in countries like China and Russia, are increasingly influencing policing strategies in developing nations with little legal oversight. The corporate defense. When questioned, tech companies often claim they are not responsible for how their tools are used once sold. They point to vague end-user agreements and deny knowledge of misuse. Yet, leaked emails, whistleblower reports, and NGO investigations reveal that many of these firms are aware or deliberately blind to the destinations and applications of their products. Conclusion of chapters 4 to 6. Torture today is not just a matter of what happens inside a cell. It begins long before in the corporate boardroom, the arms fair, or the tech startup's data server. The combination of euphemistic marketing, governmental complicity, and digital innovation has created a seamless pipeline from development to abuse. Breaking this pipeline will require more than legal reforms. It will require global awareness, political will, and a redefinition of accountability in the modern surveillance security complex. Chapter 8. Whistleblowers and investigative journalism. A world where bureaucratic secrecy and corporate opacity dominate the arms trade. Truth-telling has often depended on the bravery of insiders and the persistence of investigative journalists and NGOs. The whistleblowers. From logistics managers to customs officials, several individuals have risked their careers and lives to expose the torture economy. They have revealed falsified end-user certificates used to mask the true recipients of goods. Shell companies set up to obscure export destinations. Internal memos acknowledging that certain products may be used in human rights abuses. Whistleblowers have faced retaliation, legal threats, job loss, surveillance, and even exile. Their stories often remain anonymous due to fear of persecution. The watchdog, investigators, independent organizations, and media outlets have played a vital role in uncovering the extent of the trade. Amnesty International and the Omega Research Foundation have traced the movement of electroshock weapons and restraint chairs across borders. Human Rights Watch has documented the use of Western-supplied gear in torture chambers and during violent crackdowns. Journalists from platforms like The Guardian, BBC Panorama, and The Intercept have exposed backchannel arms deals, spyware contracts, and lobbying efforts by defense firms. Their combined efforts have led to temporary bans, parliamentary inquiries, and public outcry, but long-term systemic change remains elusive. Chapter 9. The victim's voices behind each exported stun gun or surveillance system is a life permanently altered. These are not abstract transactions. They are weapons of control used against real people, often the most vulnerable and voiceless in society. First-hand accounts. A Syrian activist describes being strapped to a restraint chair for 48 hours in a secret detention center, unable to move while interrogators used electric shock batons. A Columbian University student was dragged into a van after a protest, tracked through his phone using foreign-made spyware, and later found in a hospital with broken bones. A Chinese ethnic minority detainee in Xinjiang recounts undergoing facial scans daily before being subjected to physical punishment in camps. An Iranian journalist speaks of being lured to a foreign country, kidnapped, and tortured using tools with Western serial numbers. The lingering impact. Torture leaves behind deep psychological scars, post-traumatic stress, chronic pain, social isolation, and fear. Communities often face generational trauma, where survivors pass on their silence, distrust, and grief. And yet, many victims remain invisible in public discourse. Legal systems rarely offer recourse. Reparations are virtually non-existent. The tools that altered their lives are still being made and sold. Chapter 10. Toward accountability, ending the cycle. Confronting the global torture economy is not simply a matter of exposing its existence. It requires sustained, multi-pronged efforts that target the very systems enabling it. Policy and regulation. Expand international law to explicitly ban the export of specific physical and digital tools used in torture and political repression. Update control lists regularly to include emerging technologies like spyware, AI profiling, and biometrics. Close routing and reclassification loopholes through a global real-time export monitoring system. Corporate accountability. Impose mandatory human rights due diligence on all companies exporting security or surveillance equipment. Penalize firms that knowingly supply tools. 2 regimes with records of abuse. Enforce transparency in licensing, including public registries of buyers, quantities, and justifications. Support for victims and civil society. Establish international rehabilitation, funds, and legal aid for survivors of torture. Amplify victim testimonies through protected media, channels, and public hearings. Protect and fund independent journalism and whistleblower protections. Global awareness. Change begins with public recognition. The torture economy thrives on secrecy. Civil society must demand not only awareness but action from consumers, voters, shareholders, and institutions alike. Conclusion. A global reckoning. The manufacturing and sale of torture equipment is not a relic of a violent past. It is a thriving, modern industry, often subsidized by the very governments that claim to defend human rights. It exists in shadows, shielded by bureaucracy and sanitized language. Ending it demands more than reforms. It requires a reckoning with the systems that profit from pain, the governments that enable impunity, and the silence that lets it persist. Because every device made in a lab or factory has the potential to become an instrument of suffering. And until we confront that truth, the cycle will continue quietly but relentlessly.